The brochure for the Alaskan cruise had looked so inviting. Pictures of glittering glaciers, whales breaching against a backdrop of snow-capped mountains, and happy families bundled in cozy parkas. Mark, my husband, had been dreaming of it for years. Lily, our 12-year-old, was excited about the wildlife, and Tom, our usually stoic 15-year-old, even cracked a smile at the thought of seeing a bald eagle up close. Me? I was happy for them, truly, but a big project at work was hitting. Its deadline. The kind that needed my undivided attention if I wanted to keep my job, let alone get that promotion I'd been angling for. Plus, a week of blissful, uninterrupted quiet in the house sounded like a little slice of heaven. "Are you sure, honey?" Mark had asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "You won't be lonely?" I'd waved a dismissive hand. "Lonely? I'll be luxuriating. In peace. Go. Have fun. Send me lots of pictures of icebergs. I'll be fine, really." So, they went. I remember waving them off at the airport, a little pang in my chest as Lily clung to me for an extra second, her bright eyes shining. "Don't work too hard, Mommy," she'd whispered. Tom just gave me a quick, awkward hug. Mark kissed me, a long, lingering one. "We'll miss you." "Miss you more," I'd said, already mentally running through my to-do list for the week. The first 2 days were exactly as I'd imagined. I worked, I ate takeout standing up at the kitchen counter, I watched whatever I wanted on TV, and I relished the silence. I even managed to get ahead on the project. I'd text Mark short updates, and he'd send back blurry photos of the ship or a distant whale spout. "Having a blast! Wish you were here, but also glad you're getting your work done," one of his texts read. It was Tuesday evening, day 3 of their trip, when I started to feel a bit off. A dull ache in my stomach, like I'd eaten something that didn't agree with me. I blamed the greasy pizza from the night before, took an antacid, and tried to power through some more work. By Wednesday morning, the ache was no longer dull. It was a persistent, gnawing pain, low down on my right side. I still figured it was indigestion, maybe a stomach bug. I forced down some toast and tea, popped a couple of painkillers, and told myself it would pass. I had a video call scheduled, with my boss, and I couldn't afford to miss it. The call was agony. I tried to smile, to sound enthusiastic, but every time I shifted in my chair, a fresh wave of pain washed over me. I felt clammy and a little nauseous. My boss, thankfully, was too engrossed in his own points to notice my discomfort. When the call ended, I practically crawled to the sofa. The pain was intensifying, becoming sharp and stabbing. I tried lying on my side, on my back, curled up in a ball. Nothing helped. A little voice of panic started to whisper in the back of my mind. This wasn't just bad pizza. I thought about calling Mark. But what could he do? He was on a ship, somewhere off the coast of Alaska, probably out of decent cell range. I didn't want to worry them unnecessarily. It would pass. It had to. By late afternoon, I was sweating and shivering at the same time. The pain was so bad I could barely think straight. Every movement sent daggers through my abdomen. I tried to get up to go to the bathroom and nearly blacked out. That's when the real fear hit me, cold and stark. I was alone, seriously alone. And something was very, very wrong. I managed to fumble for my phone, my fingers clumsy and trembling. Who to call? Not Mark? Not yet. My sister lived 2 states away. My parents were retired and traveling in their RV, probably somewhere with no signal. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson? She was lovely, but in her late 70s. Could I burden her? The pain surged, and I cried out, a pathetic, weak sound. I had to call someone. I scrolled through my contacts, vision blurring, and landed on Mrs. Henderson's name. I pressed call. Her voice, when she answered, was like a lifeline. "Hello, dear?" "Mrs. Henderson," I gasped, tears streaming down my face now. "It's Sarah. I I think I need help. I'm in so much pain. Oh, my dear Lord, don't you move. I'm coming right over. The wait for her felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a minute or two. I heard her fumbling with the spare key I'd given her ages ago. The door opened, and her kind, wrinkled face appeared, etched with worry. Sarah. Good heavens. Child, you look dreadful. She took one look at me, pale and doubled over on the sofa, and her efficiency kicked in. Right. Ambulance. No arguments. She called 911, her voice calm but firm, relaying my symptoms. She held my hand while we waited, stroking it gently, murmuring comforting things. It'll be all right, dear. They'll sort you out. The paramedics arrived, a blur of questions and movement. They were professional, quick. I vaguely remember being lifted onto a stretcher, the jarring pain as they moved me, the wail of the siren as we sped off. Mrs. Henderson promised to try and reach Mark, to lock up the house. I think I mumbled a thank you. In the emergency room, things moved fast. More questions, blood tests, an ultrasound. The pain was a constant, roaring monster now, and I was drifting in and out of focus. A doctor, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes, finally came to talk to me. Mrs. Collins, she said gently, it looks like your appendix has ruptured. You have peritonitis, which is a serious infection. We need to operate immediately. Appendix? Ruptured? The words barely registered. All I could think was I'm alone. Mark doesn't know. The kids don't know. I might die here, alone. Tears welled up again. My family. They're on a cruise, in Alaska. I don't know if they can be reached. The doctor's eyes softened. We'll do our best to get in touch with them. Your neighbor gave us their contact, information for the ship. Right now, we need your consent for the surgery. I nodded, a weak, jerky movement. Yes. Just, please tell them I love them. The next thing I remember is the bright lights of the operating room, a mask over my face, a voice telling me to count backwards from 10. I think I made it to 8. Waking up was a slow, groggy process. My first sensation was a deep, throbbing ache in my abdomen, but it was different from the sharp, tearing pain before. It was a dull, surgical pain. I was alive. A nurse was fussing with my IV drip. Welcome back, Mrs. Collins. Surgery went well. You gave us quite a scare. My throat was dry. My family? I croaked. We've been trying to reach the ship, she said. It's tricky with their satellite connection, but your neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, has been calling too. We'll keep trying. The next few hours, or maybe it was a day, I don't know, were a blur of pain medication, fitful sleep, and the constant gnawing worry about Mark and the kids. Every time a nurse came in, my heart would leap, hoping for news. The silence from Alaska was deafening. I pictured them having fun, oblivious. Mark taking photos of Lily pointing excitedly at a seal. Tom actually looking interested in something other than his phone. And here I was, sliced open, tubes coming out of me, wondering if I'd ever see them again. It was a new kind of loneliness, sharper and more profound than any I'd ever imagined. It was late the next evening, I think. I was drifting in that hazy space between sleep and wakefulness when I heard a commotion outside my door. A familiar voice choked with emotion. Mark. The door burst open, and there he was. His hair was a mess. His clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them. He probably had. His face was pale, eyes wide and bloodshot. Lily and Tom were right behind him, their young faces mirrors of fear and confusion. Sarah! He rushed to my bedside, grabbing my hand, his grip almost painful. Oh my God, Sarah. We just found out. We got the first plane we could. Tears were streaming down his face, and then mine started too. Lily started to cry, a frightened little sob, and Tom just stood there looking like he was about to shatter. They said you nearly... Mark couldn't finish the sentence. He just held my hand to his cheek, his own trembling. "I'm okay," I whispered, my voice still weak. "I'm okay now." Lily crept closer, her eyes huge. "Mommy, are you really okay?" "Yes, sweetie, just a bit sore." I tried to smile, but it probably looked more like a grimace. The story tumbled out of Mark then. How Mrs. Henderson had finally gotten through to the ship's emergency line. How they'd been paged in the middle of a show, the captain himself delivering the news. The frantic scramble to get a signal to call the hospital. The agonizing wait for information. The desperate rush to disembark at the next port. The chartered small plane to a bigger airport. The red-eye flight home. They hadn't slept. Hadn't eaten much. They'd just run on adrenaline and fear. "We should never have gone," Mark said, his voice thick with guilt. "I should have been here." "Don't," I said, squeezing his hand. "You couldn't have known. I didn't even know." The relief of seeing them was so immense it was almost painful. But underneath it, a new set of emotions began to stir. The stark terror I'd felt being alone, facing my own mortality, had left a mark. And seeing the fear in their eyes, the raw guilt on Mark's face, it was a lot. The next few days in the hospital were a strange mix of pain, healing, and intense family togetherness. Mark rarely left my side. He helped me sip water, fluffed my pillows, and just sat there, holding my hand, often in silence. Lily drew me pictures of our family, all of us smiling, with a giant sun in the corner. Tom, in his own quiet way, would bring me a fresh cup of ice chips or adjust my blanket. The nurses told me I was lucky. If Mrs. Henderson hadn't found me when she did, if I'd waited even a few more hours, they didn't finish the sentence. They didn't need to. Going home was another ordeal. I was weak, shuffling, and every bump in the car sent jolts of pain through me. Our house, which had seemed so blissfully quiet just days before, now felt like a sanctuary, but also a place haunted by the memory of my solitary agony. Mark was an exemplary nurse. He managed my medication, helped me shower, cooked, surprisingly, edible meals. The kids tiptoed around, fetching things for me, their usual boisterous energy subdued. Lily would crawl into bed beside me, carefully avoiding my sore stomach, and read to me from her favorite books. Tom would sit at the end of the bed and tell me about school, or sometimes just sit, a comforting presence. But as the physical pain slowly began to recede, something else took its place. Nightmares. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, reliving those terrifying hours of being alone, the pain consuming me, the fear of dying before I could say goodbye. During the day, I'd find myself suddenly weepy. A commercial on TV, a particular song on the radio, even just the sight of Mark's worried face could set me off. I was irritable too, snapping at him for small things, then immediately feeling awful. The guilt was eating Mark alive. "I should have known you weren't well," he'd say over and over. "That project, it wasn't worth this. It wasn't your fault, Mark," I'd tell him. But the words felt hollow, even to me. A part of me, a small, irrational part, had felt abandoned. Intellectually, I knew it was ridiculous. But emotions aren't always intellectual. The project at work? I barely thought about it when my boss called, full of apologies and concern, and I suspected a little worry about how my absence would affect the deadline. I felt a strange detachment. The promotion I'd craved seemed utterly insignificant. What mattered was the feel of Lily's small hand in mine, the way Tom would awkwardly pat my shoulder, the steady warmth of Mark beside me in the night. These were the things that had once been the backdrop of my life, the constants I'd taken for granted. Now, they were everything. My recovery was slow. Weeks turned into a couple of months. I started walking more, first around the house, then short, tentative strolls outside. The physical scars were healing, a pale pink line across my abdomen. But the internal ones, they were deeper. I realized I was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of pain. Afraid of getting sick again. Little twinges in my stomach would send me into a panic. I, who had always prided myself on my independence, now clung to Mark. We talked a lot, Mark and I. More than we had in years. We talked about our fears, our regrets. He confessed how terrified he'd been on that flight home, not knowing if he'd be too late. I confessed how utterly alone I'd felt, how I'd bargained with a God I wasn't even sure I believed in, just for a chance to see them again. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, something I rarely made time for before, I said, "You know, it's strange. I nearly died, and it was the most awful thing that's ever happened to me. But something's different now." Mark looked at me, his gaze questioning. It's like, I struggled to find the words, like I was sleepwalking before, rushing around, ticking off boxes, chasing things that, well, they just don't seem that important anymore. He nodded slowly. Me too. When I thought I might lose you, everything else just fell away. The job, the mortgage, all those stupid little worries. That's when I knew. What happened after my near-death experience wasn't just about physical, healing, or even processing trauma. It was about a fundamental shift, a change in the very landscape of my heart. The first thing that changed was my relationship with time. Before, time was something to be managed, optimized, squeezed for every drop of productivity. Now, time felt precious, a gift. I started saying no to things, extra projects at work that would mean late nights, social obligations that felt more like a drain than a joy. Instead, I said yes to other things. Yes to Lily when she asked me to play a board game, even if dinner wasn't started. Yes to Tom when he wanted to show me a new video game he was excited about, even if I didn't understand half of it. Yes to Mark when he suggested a spontaneous walk, even if the laundry was piling up. The promotion I'd been working towards, I let it go. I told my boss I needed to recalibrate my work-life balance. He was surprised, but also, I think, a little understanding. I still did my job, and I did it well, but it no longer defined me. It was a part of my life, not the entirety of it. My relationship with Mark deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible. The shared trauma had forged a new bond. But it was more than that. We were more patient with each other, more openly affectionate. The little annoyances that used to spark arguments now seemed trivial. He'd leave his socks on the floor, and instead of sighing with exasperation, I'd just pick them up, sometimes even smile, remembering how terrified I was that I might never see him or his socks again. With the kids, it was like seeing them for the first time. Lily's infectious giggle, Tom's dry wit, their unique personalities that I'd been too busy to fully appreciate. I listened more. I mean, really listened. I learned about Lily's playground dramas and Tom's anxieties about college applications. I hugged them more, told them I loved them every day, not just as a routine phrase, but with the full weight of what it meant. Even Mrs. Henderson became a more central figure in our lives. She wasn't just the kind elderly neighbor anymore. She was the angel who'd saved my life. We had her over for dinner regularly. I'd bake her cookies, something I never had time for before, and we'd sit and chat for hours. She'd been widowed for years, and I realized she was probably lonely too. Our connection became a lifeline for both of us. Of course, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. There were still days when the anxiety would creep back, when a sudden pain would make my heart pound. I started seeing a therapist, which helped me process the lingering trauma, the fear, and the strange guilt I sometimes felt for having put my family through so much worry. She helped me understand that it was Okay to feel changed, that surviving something like that should change you. The biggest change, I think, was in my capacity for gratitude. It sounds like a cliché, I know. But waking up each morning, genuinely grateful for another day? It was new. The taste of my morning coffee, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the sound of my children laughing in the next room. These small, ordinary things filled me with an extraordinary sense of joy. I used to chase big moments, big achievements. The perfect vacation, the career milestone, the new car. Now, I found beauty in the mundane. A shared look with Mark across a crowded room, a quiet evening reading with Lily snuggled beside me. Tom actually initiating a conversation about his day. The Alaskan cruise photos eventually made their way into an album. For a long time, I couldn't look at them without a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. But slowly, even that began to change. I could see their happy faces, the genuine joy of their adventure, and separate it from my own terrifying experience. They deserved that joy. One afternoon, about a year after the surgery, Lily came home from school with a drawing. It was of our family, standing in front of our house. The sun was shining, and we were all holding hands, smiling. Underneath, she'd written, "My family, the best." I looked at it, and tears welled in my eyes. Not tears of sadness or fear, but tears of overwhelming love and gratitude. This was what mattered. Not the deadlines, not the promotions, not the perfectly curated life I thought I wanted. Just this. Us. Together. I nearly died while my family was on vacation. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But what happened after, the slow, painful, beautiful process of rediscovering what truly mattered, changed everything. It stripped away the non-essential, the superficial, and left behind the raw, shining core of life. Love, connection, and the precious gift of time. I wouldn't wish my ordeal on anyone, not for a second. But I wouldn't trade the clarity it brought me for anything in the world. I was no longer sleepwalking. I was finally, fully, awake. And every day, in its own quiet way, felt like a miracle.